The red dust of Mars swirled outside the tall windows of the Earth Galactic Embassy. Laura Bennett adjusted her name tag and smoothed down her dark blue dress. She watched the two moons of Mars hanging in the evening sky, still amazed that she was actually here, representing humanity among the stars. The grand reception hall buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, both human and alien. Translation devices hummed softly, creating a strange background music of electronic whispers. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd, some floating, others walking on multiple legs, and a few rolling on what looked like living wheels. Peter Bennett stood near one of the marble columns, his broad shoulders filling out his black suit perfectly. His eyes constantly scanned the room, a habit he hadn't lost since his days as a Marine. Now, as a security consultant for the embassy, he had even more reason to stay alert, but he kept his distance, letting his wife do her job. He knew how important this reception was for her career. Laura moved confidently between the different groups of aliens, her translator working overtime. As one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, she had spent years studying these species, but reading about them in reports was very different from standing next to a 12-foot-tall Kraxon or sharing drinks with a crystalline luminar. Dr. Bennett, a deep voice rumbled behind her. Your research on adaptive biology is interesting. Laura turned to face Ambassador Cathax of the Zentari. The reptilian diplomat towered over her, his scales shifting from green to blue under the reception hall's lights. Two of his 4 arms were crossed over his armored chest, while the other 2 held some kind of drinking vessel. Ambassador Cathax, thank you for reading my paper, Laura said, keeping her voice steady. The Zentari were known for their strict hierarchy and quick temper. One wrong word could cause a diplomatic incident. I hope my findings about Zentari regenerative abilities were accurate. Cathax's vertical pupils narrowed. Mostly correct, for a human researcher, though your conclusions about our evolutionary path seem limited. He leaned down, his massive head coming closer to her level. His breath smelled like mint and metal. Across the room, Peter shifted slightly, his hand unconsciously moving toward where his weapon would usually be. But he stayed put. Laura had been clear. She needed to handle these interactions herself if humans were going to be taken seriously in the galactic community. Actually, Ambassador, Laura began carefully, recent discoveries suggest that convergent evolution is more common than we thought. Several species, including humans, have developed similar traits through entirely different paths. A group of Murdari floated closer, their transparent bodies glowing with interest. The conversation was drawing attention. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and every interaction was scrutinized. Indeed, Cathax's scales rippled, a sign of either amusement or annoyance. Xenobiologists were still debating which. And you believe human evolution can be compared to the Zentari? We who have dominated 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Laura took a small sip from her glass, buying time to choose her words carefully. The reception's success might depend on her next response. She could feel Peter's protective gaze from across the room, but this was her moment to prove that humans could handle complex diplomatic situations. Each species brings unique strengths to the galactic community. Ambassador, she said diplomatically, humans have our own fascinating path of development. For instance, our endurance hunting technique is quite unique among known species. The ambassador's scales shifted to a deeper blue. Other aliens were gathering now, forming a loose circle around them. The usual reception chatter died down as more beings turned to watch the exchange between the human scientist and the powerful Zentari ambassador. No one in the reception hall could have guessed that this polite scientific discussion was about to escalate into an incident that would change galactic politics forever. The tension in the Earth Galactic Embassy's reception hall grew thicker by the second. Ambassador Cathax's scales had taken on a darker blue color, something Laura Bennett had only seen in research footage of agitated Zentari. She could feel the eyes of dozens of alien species watching their exchange with growing interest. Endurance hunting. Thax's voice carried across the now quiet room. You chase prey until it falls from exhaustion. How primitive. His upper set of arms made a dismissive gesture while his lower arms gripped his drinking vessel tighter. Laura kept her voice steady, though her heart beat faster. Primitive doesn't mean ineffective, Ambassador. Humans evolved to be persistent. We can keep going long after most species would give up. She noticed several of the floating murdery nodding in what she recognized as their gesture of agreement. Peter watched from his position by the column, his jaw tightening. The security feeds in his earpiece told him that other guards had noticed the situation too. They were ready to move if needed, but intervention now would only make things worse. His wife needed to handle this diplomatic dance herself. A charming perspective, Thax rumbled, his massive head swaying slightly. But persistence without power is meaningless. The Zentari didn't become a dominant force in the galaxy by chasing our prey until it tired. He stretched to his full height, nearly scraping the ceiling with his armored crest. A small group of actual delegates chittered nervously, their insectoid bodies shifting away from the confrontation. They had experienced Zentari dominance displays before, and they never ended well. Laura took a deep breath. With respect, Ambassador, power takes many forms. Humanity's greatest strength isn't in our muscles or our claws, but in our ability to adapt and overcome challenges. We've survived ice ages, massive predators, and our own destructive tendencies. We made it to the stars despite being what you might consider physically inferior. The surrounding aliens murmured in their various languages. Some nodded in appreciation of her diplomatic response, while others seemed shocked at her continued defiance of Zentari authority. Thax's translator crackled as he switched to a formal dialect, a bad sign for anyone familiar with Zentari customs. You speak of adaptation, Dr. Bennett, yet you fail to adapt to this simple truth. Some species are naturally superior to others. The galaxy has a hierarchy, and humans would do well to learn their place in it. The ambassador's scales now pulsed with bands of dark blue and black. Laura recognized the pattern from her research, a warning display. She should back down, show submission according to Zentari custom. But years of studying alien species had taught her that giving in now would set a dangerous precedent for all future human-Zentari relations. The only truth I've learned, Ambassador, Laura said carefully, is that underestimating any species is a costly mistake. Humanity may be young in galactic terms, but we've earned our place here through innovation, determination, and yes, adaptation. Peter's muscles tensed as he saw Thax's body language shift. The Zentari's neck spines were fully extended now, another warning sign. He began moving through the crowd, trying to close the distance to Laura without drawing attention. The ambassador's next words came out in a deep growl that made the translation devices squeal with feedback. Perhaps humans need a practical lesson in galactic hierarchy. Your species relies too much on words and theories. Dr. Bennett. Sometimes, understanding requires. His upper right hand flexed, showing razor-sharp claws. A more direct approach. The assembled aliens went completely still. Even the floating murdery seemed frozen in place. In the sudden silence, the soft hum of the embassy's air filtration system sounded unnaturally loud. The growing confrontation had passed the point of easy diplomatic resolution, and everyone in the room knew it. What happened next would be recorded in a dozen different alien formats and discussed in galactic political circles for years to come. Time seemed to slow down in the reception hall of the Earth Galactic Embassy. Laura Bennett saw Ambassador Thax's arm moving before her mind fully registered what was about to happen. The massive Zentari scales flickered with patterns of dominance and rage, a display that would have sent any member of his species running for cover. The blow came fast, faster than anyone expected from such a large being. Thax's open hand, nearly the size of Laura's entire torso, struck her across the face with enough force to lift her off her feet. The sound echoed through the silent hall like a thunderclap. Laura crashed into a nearby table, sending glasses shattering across the floor. The taste of blood filled her mouth as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Her cheek burned with pain, and she could feel swelling starting almost immediately. The alien audience reacted in various ways. The Axral delegates buzzed in distress, their wings vibrating at frequencies that made the nearby glasses hum. The Murdari's transparent bodies clouded with shock, while the crystalline luminar turned dark colors of concern. But none moved to help. In their experience, this was simply how Zentari handled disrespect. A practical lesson, Kthax announced, his translator broadcasting in multiple languages. This is how superiors correct their inferiors across the galaxy. The human will now demonstrate proper submission, and we can continue with more pleasant discussions. He waited expectantly, his 4 arms now crossed over his armored chest. In Zentari culture, the struck party would press their forehead to the ground and accept their lower status. The ambassador clearly expected Laura to do the same. Instead, Laura pushed herself up to her knees, wiping blood from her split lip. Her blue dress was stained with spilled drinks, and her name tag had been torn off in the fall. But her eyes showed no submission, only a cold, steady determination that made several nearby aliens step back. Is this? Laura's voice was steady despite her injury. Is this how a superior species behaves, Ambassador? By striking those who disagree with them. Kthax's scales rippled with surprise. This wasn't how these situations usually played out. You still showed defiance. Perhaps humans need more thorough instruction in proper behavior. He raised his hand again. That's when Peter Bennett finally reached them. He moved through the crowd like water, his steps purposeful but not rushed. His face showed no rage, no desperate anger, just absolute focus. The assembled aliens parted before him, sensing something they didn't quite understand. The embassy's security feeds captured everything in perfect detail. The way Peter loosened his tie with one hand while keeping his eyes fixed on Kthax, how he helped Laura to her feet with gentle care that contrasted sharply with what was about to happen. This human male should remove his injured female, Kthax announced, looking down at Peter with what passed for a Zentari smile. Unless he also requires instruction in proper respect. Peter handed Laura over to a concerned Murdari diplomat who had floated closer. Then he turned to face the ambassador, who stood nearly 3 feet taller than him. The size difference would have been comical if not for the deadly serious atmosphere in the room. Ambassador, Peter said quietly, his voice carrying in the tense silence, I'm going to give you a lesson of my own. One about why striking my wife was the biggest mistake you've made in your diplomatic career. The ambassador's translator crackled with what might have been laughter. You? A tiny human male, threatening me. Perhaps I should instruct both of you together. No one in that reception hall, except maybe Laura, understood just how much the galaxy's opinion of humanity was about to change in the next 30 seconds. Peter Bennett removed his suit jacket with careful, deliberate movements. The expensive garment was a gift from Laura for their 5th wedding anniversary. He folded it neatly and handed it to a nearby Luminar diplomat, who took it with crystal appendages that chimed softly in the tense silence. Ambassador Kthax watched this strange human ritual with growing amusement. His scales shifted to show patterns that any Zentari would recognize as mockery. Does removing your outer covering make you feel more powerful, little human? He asked, his 4 arms flexing to display his impressive musculature. No, Peter replied calmly, rolling up his sleeves. I just don't want to damage it. Good suits are expensive. His voice carried no anger, no challenge, just the same quiet focus he'd shown during his Marine combat training years ago. The assembled aliens murmured and shifted, recording devices humming as they captured what many expected to be a brief and brutal demonstration of Zentari superiority. Several made rapid calculations about human bone density versus Zentari striking force. Kthax moved first, as Peter knew he would. The ambassador's upper right arm shot out in a strike that would have caved in a normal person's chest. But Peter wasn't there anymore. He had already stepped inside the ambassador's reach. moving with a speed that made several alien observers adjust their visual recording settings. What happened next defied the aliens' expectations of physics. Peter grabbed one of Kithak's lower arms and used the ambassador's own momentum to disrupt his balance. The massive Centauri stumbled, all four arms flailing as his center of gravity shifted unexpectedly. "Impossible," Kithak snarled, his translator crackling with interference. He tried to bring his other arms into play, but Peter stayed too close, always moving, never giving the larger alien a clean target. The floating Murdari clustered near the ceiling now, their transparent bodies pulsing with excitement as they recorded everything. The actual delegates chittered rapidly in their native language, their compound eyes tracking every movement of the unusual combat. Peter worked with surgical precision, using techniques developed over centuries of human martial arts and adapted for his time in the Marines' Xenocombat division. He struck pressure points that worked on most reptilian species, blocked nerve clusters that his wife's xenobiology research had identified, and used the ambassador's size against him. Thax grew more frustrated with each passing second. His strikes became wilder, his movements less controlled. "Stand still and accept your punishment," he roared, his scales now almost black with rage. "Like my wife did." Peter's voice remained steady as he dodged another blow. "No, Ambassador, that's not how humans handle conflict." He moved inside Kithak's guard again, this time targeting a specific cluster of nerves near the ambassador's primary spine. The strike was precise, powerful, and perfectly placed. Thax's eyes widened as his legs suddenly failed to respond to his commands. The mighty Centauri ambassador, terror of three spiral arms of the galaxy, collapsed to his knees with a crash that shook the reception hall's floor. Peter stepped back, straightening his tie. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. The ambassador knelt before him, all four arms limp, his scales showing patterns of confusion and disbelief. "The nerve cluster will release in about 5 minutes," Peter explained professionally. "You'll have full movement back, with no permanent damage, just enough time for you to think about a few things." The room had gone completely silent. Even the electronic hum of translation devices seemed muted. Dozens of alien species stared at the scene before them, their various recording devices capturing every detail of this historic moment. "First," Peter continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silence, "humans don't submit to bullies, no matter their size. Second, we protect our own. And third," he paused, making sure Kithak's translator caught every word, "you owe my wife an apology." The next few minutes in the Earth Galactic Embassy's reception hall felt like hours. Medical teams, both human and alien, rushed into the space. The Murdari doctor who first reached Laura Bennett moved with surprising speed for a floating being, their transparent form glowing with diagnostic lights. "Fractured cheekbone," the Murdari announced through their translator. "Minor concussion. Soft tissue damage." Their gelatinous body pulsed with healing energies as they administered immediate first aid. Peter stayed close to his wife, but kept one eye on Ambassador Thax, who remained kneeling on the floor. The ambassador's scales had taken on a pale, almost white color that no one in the room had ever seen on a Centauri before. The embassy's security chief, Alan Rogers, moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. "The Galactic Council has been notified," he told Peter quietly. "They're convening an emergency session. All recordings of the incident have been secured." The actual delegates had already formed a communication circle, their antennae linking to share information faster than any electronic device could manage. The news of what happened here would reach every major species in the galaxy within the hour. Feeling started to return to Kithak's limbs. The mighty ambassador pushed himself up on shaking arms, his usual fluid grace completely gone. His vertical pupils fixed on Peter with an unreadable expression. "You?" Kithak's translator crackled, searching for the right words. "You could have killed me." "Yes," Peter agreed simply. "But that's not how humans handle diplomatic incidents. We believe in proportional response and peaceful solutions. He glanced at Laura, who managed a small smile despite her injuries. Usually, a group of Luminar crystallized into a communication formation, their bodies chiming in what seemed like approval. One of them floated forward, their facets glowing with official authority. As the ranking member of the Galactic Council present, the Luminar's harmonic voice translated, "I must officially document this incident. Never in our records has a Zentari ambassador been defeated in such a manner." Thax's scales rippled with complex patterns of shame, anger, and something else, perhaps respect. "The human moved like water," he said slowly. "No wasted motion, no blind rage. Even our warrior caste doesn't show such control." Laura, now being helped to her feet by the Murdari doctor, spoke up. Her voice was steady despite her injuries. "As I was trying to explain, Ambassador, humanity's strength isn't in our size or natural weapons. It's in our ability to learn, adapt, and overcome challenges." The ambassador turned all four arms upward in a gesture of submission that made several alien diplomats gasp. "Perhaps," he rumbled, "I should have listened to your words before resorting to traditional Zentari methods." Peter helped Laura into a chair that an Axrill had quickly brought over. The insectoid alien's wings buzzed with what their cultural database identified as appreciation. "Your species," Thax continued, looking at both Laura and Peter, "deserves more study, more respect." He straightened to his full height, scales slowly returning to their normal color. "I will personally ensure the Zentari High Command learns of this educational experience." The Luminar representative chimed in agreement. "This incident will require extensive review by the Council. However, initial analysis suggests the human response was justified and admirably restrained." Security teams were already cleaning up the broken glasses and righting overturned furniture. The other alien diplomats began talking among themselves, their various communication methods creating an unusual symphony of sounds, lights, and vibrations. The galaxy's political landscape had shifted in less than 5 minutes. Humanity had just proven they weren't just clever primitives playing at diplomacy. They were a species that demanded respect, capable of both intellectual discourse and physical defense when needed. The news spread through the galaxy faster than a quantum transmission. Within 24 hours, the Galactic Council's central chamber on Europa was packed with representatives from every major species. The massive circular room hummed with different atmospheres, each delegation protected in their own environmental bubble. Laura Bennett sat in the human section, a medical patch covering her cheek. The Murdari healing treatment had worked wonders, but some bruising remained. Peter stood behind her chair, still in his security consultant role, but now the subject of countless curious alien stares. "The Council will now review the events at the Earth Galactic Embassy," announced the Chief Arbiter, a Luminar whose crystalline form sparkled under the chamber's lights. "All recordings have been verified as authentic." The holographic displays activated, showing the incident from multiple angles. Laura noticed how many of the alien delegates leaned forward or extended their sensory organs to watch more closely. The Zentari High Command's delegation sat in their raised platform, their scales shifting with complex emotions as they watched their ambassador strike Laura, then be systematically disabled by Peter. Several younger Zentari in the group showed signs of intense interest in the humans' fighting technique. "The Zentari Dominion demands sanctions against Earth," growled the head of the Zentari delegation. This human male attacked a diplomatic representative. A soft chiming filled the chamber as the Luminar Chief Arbiter replayed the critical moments. Records show clear provocation. Ambassador Thax initiated physical contact against an unarmed diplomatic consultant. The Axrill representative buzzed their wings for attention. "Our hive's analysis confirms that the human response was precisely calculated to neutralize without causing permanent harm. This shows both superior combat capability and admirable restraint." More species joined the discussion. The Murdari delegation floated higher in their excitement, their transparent bodies pulsing with light as they spoke. Our medical scans confirm the human female suffered significant injury from the ambassador's strike. The male's response was proportional and defensive. In their environmental bubble, the Zentari delegation's scales darkened with frustration. They were used to their physical superiority, giving them diplomatic advantages. This situation was unprecedented. A small delegation of Kraxan, their 12-foot frames cramped even in the large chamber, raised their speaking staffs. We have observed humanity's potential since their arrival in the galactic community. This incident proves what we suspected. They are not to be underestimated. Laura squeezed Peter's hand as more species voiced their support. The Galactic Council's atmosphere was shifting, just like the cultural understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Furthermore, the Luminar Chief Arbiter continued, this incident has revealed something significant about human capabilities. Their combination of physical skill and ethical restraint suggests a level of advancement we may have overlooked. The Zentari head delegate's scales shifted to a formal pattern. The High Command has reviewed the situation. We acknowledge that Ambassador Cathax's actions were inappropriate. The human response, while unexpected, was within acceptable parameters of self-defense. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Zentari rarely admitted wrong in any situation. Their words carried extra weight because of this. In light of this incident, the Zentari continued, their translator crackling with what might have been embarrassment. We wish to propose an exchange program. Our warrior caste could benefit from studying human combat techniques. In return, we offer access to our biological research facilities. Laura sat up straighter. Such an offer from the Zentari was unprecedented. She could already see the scientific possibilities, the chance to bridge the gap between their species. The Chief Arbiter's crystalline form chimed with approval. This council recognizes humanity's right to defend its members while appreciating their measured response. The proposed exchange program will be reviewed favorably. In less than 2 days, humanity's position in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. They were no longer seen as just clever newcomers. They were now recognized as a species that could defend itself while maintaining diplomatic composure. 3 months after the incident at the Earth Galactic Embassy, Laura Bennett stood at a podium in the newly established Interspecies Cultural Center on Mars. Her cheek had healed completely thanks to advanced Murdari medical techniques, leaving no trace of Ambassador Cathax's strike. The lecture hall was packed with representatives from 24 species. Even the environmental bubbles for methane-breathing aliens were filled to capacity. Everyone wanted to hear from the human scientist who had sparked such dramatic changes in galactic politics. Understanding leads to respect. Laura began, her words automatically translated into multiple languages. What happened 3 months ago wasn't just about physical conflict. It was about cultural misunderstanding and the opportunity to learn from our differences. In the front row, Ambassador Cathax himself sat listening intently. His scales now showed patterns of scholarly interest rather than aggression. Behind him, several members of the Zentari warrior caste took notes with all 4 arms. Peter watched from the side of the stage, no longer just a security consultant. He now headed the center's defense training program, teaching representatives from various species about human combat techniques and philosophy. His classes had a waiting list 3 years long. The exchange program with the Zentari has already yielded amazing results. Laura continued, bringing up a holographic display. Their regenerative abilities, combined with human endurance characteristics, have led to breakthroughs in medical science that benefit all species. The actual scientific team buzzed with excitement as she showed cellular-level images. Their hive had been among the first to adopt the new healing techniques, saving countless lives across their colonies. But the most important discovery wasn't medical or tactical, Laura said, smiling at her audience. It was learning that strength comes in many forms. The Zentari taught us about direct action, while humans demonstrated the power of controlled response. Together, we're stronger than either of us would be alone. In the back of the hall, a group of Murdari floated near the ceiling, their transparent bodies glowing with approval. They had become strong advocates for human-style diplomatic training, appreciating how humans could be both forceful and restrained. Ambassador Cathak stood up, his massive frame drawing all eyes. Dr. Bennett speaks truth, his translator broadcasted. The Zentari have ruled through physical power for millennia. But humans showed us that true strength includes knowing when not to use force. His scales shifted to show formal respect, a pattern he had once reserved only for his own kind. Peter moved to join his wife on stage as the audience applauded in their various ways, clapping, buzzing, chiming, and glowing. The couple had become symbols of humanity's dual nature: the scientist and the warrior, the diplomat and the protector. The Galactic Council has approved expansion of the exchange program, Laura announced. Next year, we'll open similar centers on 3 more planets. Every species has something to teach and something to learn. The news rippled through the audience. The Luminar representatives chimed with joy, their crystalline forms sparkling. Even the usually stoic Kraxan showed excitement by extending their ceremonial crests. As the presentation ended, Peter and Laura walked together through the center's halls. Through the massive windows, they could see construction crews, both human and alien, working on new additions to the facility. "Did you ever think," Laura asked, watching the Zentari engineering team carefully lift a massive support beam, "that you defending me would change the galaxy?" Peter smiled, remembering that tense moment in the embassy. "I was just protecting my wife. But that's the thing about humans. We tend to change things just by being ourselves." Outside, Mars' twin moons hung in the pink sky, watching over this new chapter in galactic history. The incident that could have sparked a diplomatic crisis had instead opened doors, built bridges, and shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their muscles or weapons. It was in their ability to turn confrontation into cooperation. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other species were learning an important lesson. Never underestimate humans, whether they're wielding scientific theories or defending their loved ones. Sometimes, they might just surprise you with both.